I'm very well, Colin. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Yeah, very good. Well, look, we had, I think it was 2 weeks ago, our annual update on the 10 by 20 by 30 initiative, which is something that I think was inspired by Dave Lewis of Tesco, which said that if the top 10 retailers could recruit their top 20 suppliers each, together they could make a really good, effort and could start to accelerate the towards the objective of reducing food waste by 50% by 2030. And we've been doing an annual update. It's the secretariat for that is Brian Lipinski from the World Resource Institute. So he was the one that kicked off the presentation. We heard from Danone, we then heard from Tesco, we then heard from Compleat Food, and then Food Cloud gave us a bit of a wrap up of what they're doing outside of Europe and some work in Africa. All very inspiring. We had a good number of retailers on the call, I think over 60 or 70. So high engagement on this topic. What were your sort of key takeaways?
Yes, I think, as you pointed out there, the first person we heard from was Brian Lipinski, and I think it was interesting to get a progress update on how this is all going. And I think everybody echoed in on the call that, that there were, trying to find the number, I think we had 236 companies had all signed up to this, but an average of the progress so far is 15.4%. So I think they're echoed in the room that is, somewhat disappointing, but progress has been made. There are some people that really stood out as being great progress. Yeah. So I don't think it's altogether bad news. So I think, that was definitely a good piece of insight to understand how things are going, but certainly drew out the conversation around the measures across different markets and how different people are measuring in the first place, where they're getting their baseline from. And of course, when we're looking at making a 50% reduction, somebody came up with that would be the percentage that would get us to a place that we needed to be. So unless you're taking your baseline from that same point, it probably doesn't align too well in some instances. And I would suggest that, maybe in that criteria, that as well as aligning all of the measures, that we should look at where the baseline is, or at least for certain, taking your business from, we're in a good place now, we're going to make a 50% reduction from now. And that would be a good starting point, really, from that. So I think that was a good place to start.
Yes, it was. As you say that, we heard earlier on in the year, didn't we, from Professor Lisa Jack around just some of the sort of inconsistencies in the measures. Not all the definitions are the same, not all the baselines are the same. And importantly, not all of them they're sort of self-reported, perhaps, rather than having an audited undertaken on them to sort of validate the findings and validate the 15.4% number, whatever it is.
Yes. So I think that there's a definite opportunity there, and I think there's more conversations to be had, and I think genuinely there are lots of businesses out there that are making, as we say, great progress. They're measuring it in the right way and taking a reasonable baseline as well. So I think it's fair to say that there are businesses out there doing that. But I think then moved on to Danone. They're got a good toolkit there to sort of make some progress and really taking some initiatives and running with them, and some of those things, are probably moving the needle. Some of them are not measurable about whether they're helping them move or helping the consumer movement as well. So we learned about the notes on the pack around whether you should smell, taste, look at the quality of the product and see whether or not that's still good to eat. But of course, it's immeasurable to see whether that's actually making a difference to consumers. But they're making some difference in their business. I think it's 20% against their baseline. So well done to Danone. And I think in different markets as well, what we learned was that there's a bit of a shift in responsibility for food waste. So I think they're taking the responsibility in different markets, and people going around stores and monitoring the date codes and removing it, donating it, or whatever the redistribution channel may be for them. So I think that was interesting to learn from them as well.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Then we moved on to Tesco reporting on, great progress on recruiting 117 suppliers. So no mean feat there. But I think, there's overall, again, I think we heard again from Tesco the same number that Brian told us at the very beginning, that 15% reduction on average across those. So it seems to be cut across the board. And of course, if they've got 117 suppliers, it's probably about half of the amount that are on there anyway. So it's probably no surprise that they're all at around 15% as well. But, a great start. And I guess that initiative of, getting those 10 top retailers to recruit 20 suppliers was the right way to go about it. But I think, in sort of closing that whole remark around 10 by 20 by 30, I think you would have kind of assumed that at some point we would be looking at how do they help each other. I think we've got great work in Danone, great work in the retailers, lots of businesses all doing great work, but in silo. And actually what you'd expect when they're joining to encourage these people to make a reduction in food waste is that they would have some kind of joint business plan, as we heard from with Compleat Food as well. So Compleat Food doing some great work themselves, but possibly, in the same way, a victim of over ordering, but which is a way of the world for retailers, preliminary order for whatever food they need, and then they may not need it all. But Compleat Food trying to donate that through the use of fair share, which is a great way to make sure that you redistribute that, but not so great in prevention.
Yes, yeah. There was talk about mandatory reporting as well. I don't know where any country is. I think that it keeps on getting discussed in the UK at least, and I think there's some legislation around the world, but I'm not sure the pros and cons of that. Especially it relates to what you just mentioned about, does it change the shift in where the waste lies? Does it lead to perhaps the wrong outcomes?
Yeah, and I think that's what we've probably got to learn from some of the markets, some of the countries where they have got this mandatory food waste reporting, and of course what's happening with people that are reporting on a voluntary basis at the moment. Does it have that kind of impact? Does it shift them one way or the other to try and move the responsibility of food waste, or steer away from things that might put them in that light? But of course, I think we've spoken about a number of times is that as a retail business, you don't want to disappoint customers. So you're always going to make sure that there is enough food on the shelf, because availability is king. So if you don't have full availability, people will go elsewhere.
Yes, it's that sort of dilemma. Do I order one too many perhaps, or one too few? And I think it's one too many, especially that's Christmas time, I imagine.
Yeah, for sure. But I think I think there's an opportunity here for us to perhaps get this group back together again and start talking about this whole silo impact and whether there is opportunity for joint business plans.
Yeah, no, that's a really good action point. No, thank you for that. Well, Richard, thank you as ever for taking down some notes and sharing your thoughts with us. We'll be back again with some more updates and some more meetings and some more podcasts. But for now, thank you very much.
Brilliant. Pleasure.
Cheerio.
Bye-bye.